Hey, Vinnie, and thanks for inviting me here today. Happy to share a little bit about how the planning business is focused on industries, which is obviously a huge area of interest, not only for us as a vendor, but also for customers, users, and prospects, obviously.
Tom, thanks for joining me. Looking forward to this. There's a big announcement at Rising that verticals are going to be important. So we're going to hear from your transactional colleagues about verticals, but nice to hear the analytical side too.
Yeah, and you say are going to, but the reality is, especially on the planning side, they've always been important. And I think that just fundamentally, a tool like planning is typically a blank slate coming in, and so it really doesn't take shape or form until somebody builds something. And at the point they're doing that, it is inherently bespoke and focused on their use case, their industry, and their business. And so we see a lot of variation arise, that in that process. And some of the initiatives I think we're working on now are really continuation of things that have been, active parts of planning for years, right? At least before I've even been involved. Quick safe harbor statement. I may be making some forward-looking statements. We all know the world is fraught with risk and uncertainty, and that applies certainly to product roadmaps as well. So if you're making buying decisions, do so based on the product that exists today.
Planning vendors aren't allowed to hide behind safe harbor. You're used to futures.
Yeah, it's funny. It's almost laughable because most of the commentary around planning these days, right? It's how do you navigate uncertainty, prepare for the unknown? So it's almost trite to sort of be highlighting that. And then the next slide is, welcome to an uncertain world. We're going to try to wade through it, in some fashion. So totally understand. It was funny, as I was putting this together, the thing that kind of struck me is, I would say actually almost virtually all of the product development and priorities, themes, features we take to market are inherently horizontal in nature, in terms of driving, better models, calculations. All boils down to kind of math and user experience in the end. And so if I look at those things as key themes and what's made us successful as a product and vendor, this intuitive UI experience that has sort of consumer grade ease of use. Performance and scale, so the ability to chunk through large data sets and allow unlimited versioning and dimensionality, these things. The interaction with source transactional systems for planning, right? So planning is about what the future looks like, and that's always hinges on what the past has happened, those touch points into your HCM, your ERP systems, as well as the introduction of AI and ML technologies to sort of help with predictive modeling, all that stuff. It just has applications kind of in every industry, and that's been, I think important to kind of keep in mind. That said, there are a few feature, development areas that benefit certain industries disproportionately, and I kind of wanted to call a few of those out as we sort of see that. And again, even with these examples, there are they cut across different things, and that'll be kind of obvious as I sort of run through them. Does that make sense, Finn?
Yep.
So the first one was flexible time hierarchies, right? So, most businesses operate on a monthly, quarterly, annual cadence, and then, kind of multi-year plans on the backs of that. But there are a lot of businesses that operate differently or have elements of their business that need to operate on different calendars and cadences, right? So retail and hospitality can operate on a 52-week cycle, 4-4-5s. You have higher education or operating on trimesters, things that don't sort of always line up elegantly with that, month, quarter, annual cadence. And so the introduction of flexibility from model and making time really a flexible dimension has been very helpful for those industries in rendering and tracking their business. And even sort of as unique things as, hey, I want to look at, Christmas this year versus Christmas last year. And, that can be on a different day of the week, this kind of thing. So that's been a big one. Another one, derived dimensions and geo mapping. And so for the folks out there, derived dimensions is a little bit of a tricky concept. It's almost like a rules engine. So most dimensions are, function of your data, and it's okay. The everything that happens in Minnesota is in the north, and that's that's the dimension, right? The exercise when it comes to a lot of territory modeling and planning from like sales teams for tech companies like us, there needs to be a lot of fluidity in that dimensionality. So the exercise itself is one of, well, what if I redraw the lines and change things? And so we've introduced some functionality that allows people to have dimensions be derived from other data elements and be adjust those on the fly in an ad hoc kind of way to see what, hey, well, what does the North region look like if we take Minnesota out or put something else in? Does that make sense?
Yep.
And and obviously to visualize all of that in a map form and see that kind of spread out so you can assess proximity and these kind of things. Now, again, obviously, the use of maps for reporting is something that cuts across industries broadly, but here there's a very elegant use case that we've helped enable for, in this case, enterprise software technology, anybody doing territory carving exercises. Demand forecasting is another big one. This is obviously ML technology that benefits all industries, but we see in particular CPG companies, manufacturing, products, retail, anything with a heavy consumer element that's driving behavior. Big data sets there. That tends to be really important for those types of businesses.
Yeah,
and then the last one.
that's becoming
Sorry, go ahead.
so sophisticated, right? I wrote a Costco case study, which obviously, your point about Christmas is a different day each year. That was just a basic requirement they had, but they were telling me about how they even look at gas prices. And gas prices are high, the traffic increases because Costco has a 20-30 cent advantage.
The hook to get the loss leader to get you in there. Yeah.
Right. And that typically people don't just go in for gas, they go into the store. So, it's amazing how sophisticated it's becoming in certain industries.
Yeah, and that you sort of point to the car analogy. So one of the big use cases of a customer, Team Car Care, which is Jiffy Lube, right? They're looking at weather patterns and all sorts of third-party data elements that determine how frequently you need to go and get snow tires or get a car wash or oil change, that kind of thing. So yeah, we see it. It tends to be where you have big data consumer volume type activity, and that's what's driving the top line. Less so on something like an enterprise software where it's a function of rep productivity and bodies in the field kind of thing. Those tend to be more conventionally based on formula, although there are obviously applications for ML and AI technologies and those businesses as well, just not necessarily around that demand forecasting use case. Okay, last one I wanted to highlight was kind of detailed allocations, and it's actually a byproduct of something that it's not necessarily really even planning functionality, but is functionality that exists within the Workday stack broadly. And that's the use of Prism Analytics products, which is basically a big data hub. And what that enables us to do is chunk through huge data sets to do complex and detailed allocations. We've seen those be really important for healthcare, for example, right? And so if I want to figure out down to the sort of individual procedure level, what profitability looks like, what costs are associated with that, you're talking millions of procedures across, hundreds of hospitals kind of thing. Those are big data sets, and the use of the sort of leaning on the rest of the Workday platform to accomplish things that are important for planning has been really interesting. So healthcare, financial services is another big area where that comes in, where you have huge loan portfolios, millions of sort of instruments that you're trying to do, basically big data type activities, which aren't typically well suited for planning platforms per se. And so leaning on some other supporting pieces of the technology landscape have been very helpful for certain industries and use cases. Make sense?
Yep.
Cool. So the other, and this is, we sort of did a little bit, we're sort of building into the crescendo here. And I think this is certainly it when it comes to industries and in particular planning. And that's the use of industry models, templates, et cetera, that are mapped to key use cases across various industries. And so over the last couple of years, we've undertaken a pretty big exercise, and this is just a snippet off of our webpage, to sort of carve out key use cases, models that are relevant for, in this case, we did 13 of the main sort of industry header categories. Within that, there are a whole bunch of sub industries underneath there. So underneath banking, you also have credit unions and regional banks and asset management and other things. But that's been incredibly helpful in terms of engaging with prospects, customers, helping like lines of communication across the business as we engage with them, and also facilitating model expansion and adoption of best practices. So I drilled down kind of into one sort of example here, like to just nonprofit, off the cuff. And so, hey, if I'm a nonprofit, what are the critical models that I need to render and operate my business? And if you look at the sort of playlist that pops up there when you click on the see demo buttons, you'll see a laundry list of, in this case, grant planning, right? So how do I look at money coming into the organization, program expense budgeting, personnel planning, membership and events modelings. There could also be probably a few more here under, well, if I'm a zoos and aquariums, what if I'm a health provider kind of thing. And that's been incredibly helpful for documenting the scope of work that's out there, all of the sort of amazingly diverse things that customers do when they start building models on the adaptive platform.
So Tom, here's a question I have.
Okay.
Given that you don't own most of the operational systems in these sectors, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have clinical systems in healthcare. You don't have merchandising in retail and so on. Couldn't they take a data lake approach? I mean, why would Workday be that much better than other analytical solutions that people have today?
Well, I guess sort of two questions implicit in there. So the notion of should folks have a data lake? Absolutely. And no reason not to. That I think is more just a decision on, hey, how do I pull together information from disparate sources, make it accessible from a reporting and put it in front of eyeballs in the organization to make decisions. I think you never see in a data lake is actually, it's all historical, right? So that it's all backward looking data that's been assembled. And the tools that accomplish that, and the reference I was making earlier to Prism Analytics is an element of that. Those people aren't creating forward plans in those data lakes. It's a tool for data aggregation and historical reporting. When it comes to looking and predicting the future, that's an exercise that's calculation and formula driven typically, right? And so that when I think about planning, that's what the Workday adaptive planning tool is enabling and accomplishing for folks. How do I, look at what all of the sum total of all of my, grants look like over the last year and how they carve up between restricted and unrestricted. But fundamentally in planning, I'm trying to forecast the future of that stuff. And there's an important activity that sort of needs to happen. And that's, hey, the connection between those two. So needing to see the historical past to, accurately predict the future. And then even I'd say more importantly, and almost the raison d'etre around planning and FP&A, which is sort of our, persona, is the budget versus actual, right? So you put this plan together, well, what actually happened? And so the plan at some point, there's an actual against it, and those need to be lined up and compared. And there's a big reporting exercise that goes, alongside with that. And to accomplish that, those data points need to be, they need to come together somewhere. And so for folks, when they deploy planning, okay, I built my forward model and my, planning application. How then do I actualize against that? Well, either the planning data needs to go into the data warehouse and I do my budget versus actual there. Or I need to take the actual from the data warehouse and use the reporting tools that Workday Adaptive Planning to do my BVA, budget versus actual, on the planning side. And there's reasonable answers and people resolve that on both sides of the fence. If that makes sense. The sort of part two of your question is, why is Workday interesting when there are also data lake technologies? I think if I put the planning stuff aside, Workday owns a pretty big chunk of the back office. And so while yes, there are, typically operational, almost invariably, specific operational systems at industry levels, two big chunks, your people and your dollars. those, with Workday, those can be, pulled together into Workday HCM and Workday Financials. And that offers you a lot of, I think elegance, benefit in terms of having those be able to, talk to each other and operate on a, with awareness of each other in a way that to accomplish that in a, environment where you're having to stitch together just sort of third-party tools that aren't necessarily designed to work together. It's just harder, more costly, more expensive, and challenging to sort of keep in sync. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Cool. Well, listen, the other thing I kind of wanted to focus on is, and this is actually very much part and parcel to the use of this sort of environment of models and the diversity that lives out there, and that's the planning marketplace that we pulled together, and that's basically a library of 70, I'll call them templates, that our partners have developed around different use cases in different industries. And that's been an incredibly valuable resource in terms of helping folks. I mean, the biggest question that we get from customers and to some degree prospects alike is, I think I can be doing more. What are other people like me doing, or other companies like me? And so this has been a big effort to help propagate some of those best practices, document some of what's out there. It's been invaluable for our reps and organization being conversant in what are the key use cases that matter in different industries, and also those folks kind of seeing what their peers are building.
Nice.
Go ahead.
I said nice.
Yeah, no, this has been something we've been after for a long time, and it spans industry solutions, right? So specific things around uniqueness of different industries, horizontal things like, hey, managing cash flow, workforce, debt covenants, things that lots of businesses do, and also, and you mentioned this, kind of alluded to the system specific connections, and some of those tend to be unique operational systems that, hey, I need information from my point of sale. I'm a retailer that needs to inform my plans, kind of thing. They cut across, every different industry that's out there. And you can see some of the diversity here in the different use cases. Now, it's kind of interesting. I would say, while yes, they're very diverse, there are some key themes that emerge, right? And so, like, if you look at across the various industries, there's typically something around the top line, or how the organization generates revenue, right? And whether that's a nonprofit and it's called grant planning, or it's a hospital and it's called hospital bed utilization, or it's banking and it's called, actually ironically, balance sheet planning, or it's a software company and it's called rep capacity and cohort modeling. So something around the top line, dollars coming in, which naturally. There's typically a people element, again, if it's higher ed, it's called faculty planning. If it's, banking, it's about call centers and staffing there, right? So they take different flavors. There's usually a budgeted expense category, so non-discretionary sort of expense, non-personnel. And then there's typically some profitability angle, right? And that can look differently across different industries, but fundamentally you're trying to carve up, segment your business and find what's working, what's not. It can be branch profitability if it's retail banking, or store unit level economics. It can be product based if you're a manufacturer and what have you. But we do see some themes emerge, fortunately. Otherwise it would be kind of a crazy scattershot. Make sense?
And but where are these cataloged? Is it easy for customers to navigate through this, or do they have to go through a salesperson to identify these partner solutions?
Yeah, so actually that underlined word up there is the link to the marketplace, and there are a series of tiles that you can kind of browse. We're actually in the process of, I have an RFP out to a vendor to kind of redo this marketplace to make it more externally focused and able for folks to kind of navigate, and also actually bring together a bunch of other elements at Workday that sort of belong in this marketplace, because it's not just about planning. We have a huge tech stack. It's not just about some template models. This is also, badged integrations, all of our extend apps. There's a series of packaged solutions that cut across different products that the partners have stitched together. And so we want to like accommodate a broader desire to shop and understand, for me as a manufacturer, what's on the, what's available for me. Sense? An important caveat here, because I want, there's a bit of a misconception, I'll say, and it's a little bit of like sort of seductive thinking, right? So, hey, there's this model and it's built just for me, and it does kind of just what I want. The sort of tendency is to think, oh, well, I can just pull this thing off the shelf and put it into production, and it's it's time to value, and that's how it's accomplished. The reality is that's not quite how it works. And while yes, these templates and models are invaluable for time to value, getting going faster, they function more, I would say, as a reference point and a straw man to educate, talk to, so that we, the vendor, the implementing partner, the customer, the prospect, can all kind of like talk about the common language and reference a thing that's discrete that they can point to. Very rarely do you see actually deployment happen on a packaged template basis, like it just gets shipped into production and used in the field when it comes to planning, because the planning has such I would say expectation and is a mature market, and there it's almost invariably, even identical companies that are doing like the same thing, there will be variance in terms of how they want to implement what they want to know. That the notion that you deploy a template and that's sufficient for what they want is sort of not really how it happens. And these tools, planning, our application, for example, is easy enough to mold and customize. It's usually quicker to build from scratch, but you're importantly building towards a known entity that you're sort of talking about and kind of communicate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, you're in the packaged software market, so people do assume you have a 90% solution, right?
Yeah. Okay. A quick, if you kind of click into one of these marketplace tiles, you can kind of see that somebody's written up the description. There's typically a demo, sort of evidence they can see and around the model, a little tour. And then, I think what's been really important about this exercise of documenting a lot of these use cases, putting together this marketplace of libraries, is that has facilitated and enabled us to support a lot of networking and community events. So I call out one here for, this is our E&G, so education, government, and nonprofit slots into that as well. They put together basically a quarterly cadence of roundtables that are sort of backboned by this library of content around, hey, okay, in January, we're knocking off the first topic. What does, staff planning look like in higher ed? Okay, quarter Q2, how does grant planning look for, nonprofits, right? And so they have a series of like, themed discussions around these key use cases, are sort of facilitated for customers, prospects, and also, partners that sort of are spearheading these based on the work that they've done and their expertise in the industries. Make sense? And then the last kind of, I think, thing I'd point to in our efforts and working for in industries is just some of the verticalization across the organization. So we've now started to specialize and focus sales reps and sales engineers and demo folks, demo model content, et cetera. That's been invaluable in terms of, the faster and smarter reps are in terms of knowing the use cases, the customers themselves, and that just happens faster when you're focused, and that helps them communicate and hit the nail on the head when they're talking to what new folks want. There's the ability to develop marketing content. So these demo models, for example, host events like the roundtable, and again have those sort of focused down into you just get a deeper level of content specificity when folks are kind of coming at things similarly and trying to solve problems that are quite close. They can, can be a level of discussion that's much more in depth than just, Excel is a pain in the neck to roll up data. Sure. We can talk about how did you model and that tends to be much more fruitful discussion. And the last of that partner ecosystem that I mentioned. So, these, whether it's boutiques that focus on just a particular niche, or, some of the big boys, Deloitte and KPMG, that have whole industry practices that they're kind of bringing to bear to sort of support these efforts.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to use the
Yeah,
group.
it's been a lot of work. What more can I tell you?
No, you brought out dimensions on user groups and partners that
Yeah.
very few other vendors do. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, that's kind of how, like I said, the biggest question you get from folks is, I don't know what I don't know. I want to hear what other folks are doing. That, that peer community, particularly given, kind of the volume of customers that we're at now. If I look just across the planning business, it's north of 6,000 organizations, right? And so there is a lot of critical mass and density, even if you start, cutting that up into different, verticals and even micro verticals.
Excellent. Thank you.
Well, listen, Vinnie, thank you very much for inviting me today. Wish you the best, and reach out to us if you want to see a model that you don't see up there already.